ask you very generically, and I'll start on this side this time, Mr. Walz. Give us perhaps the biggest achievement legislatively of this legislative session that just ended.
Yeah, you know, I think there was a lot of important work done in a very short time period, short session. But for us, I think Senate Bill 150 was probably the biggest win for families in Kentucky and for protecting kids.
And this is the bill that particularly pertains to transgender youth.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite frame it that way. Mm-hmm. I would say it's about protecting children from concerning ideologies in school, about empowering parents. You know, it really kind of came together with three different pieces. So there was the help not harm portion of the bill that protects children from these very, very harmful, life-altering medical interventions in the name of doing something that's just not possible, changing someone's sex. And so we're seeing a proliferation of these activities, testimony that these kinds of transitions were happening here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, unfortunately. So we're very thankful that the legislature took action to protect our kids from irreparable harm. The other part of it was the important protections as it relates to education, parental rights and education. You know, I think we have seen both here in Kentucky and across the nation just a groundswell of parents recognizing some of it in light of COVID and what had gone on, really for the first time seeing some of the harmful ideologies and things that are just simply not appropriate for kids to be learning and being promoted in our public schools most prominently. So some very important protections in that bill that I think are going to make a lasting impact and empower the schools to get back to teaching the things that unfortunately we're lacking at, reading and arithmetic and the basics. And then finally, you know, the common sense, one of the most common sense parts of the bill, protecting privacy and safety in intimate facilities. You know, we had testimony in the lead up to the day that the legislature overwhelmingly overrode the governor's veto of this bill about in Kentucky when the legislative session was going on, female students in school districts having their privacy violated by school districts that were allowing biological boys access to girls' restrooms and facilities. And I think we saw just an outcrying of a desire from different parts of the state to say, look, we want to just set common sense policies. So I think taken together, SB 150 is a win for parents. It's a win for kids because we ultimately know that that empowering parents is the best way to protect children. And then ultimately, I think it's going to be a win for our schools as we incentivize and equip parents to be more involved. So I think that's an important victory here for Kentucky.
From Lincoln County, why does the Family Foundation feel they have a victory on House, or should be Senate Bill 150, when now they have sentenced those children who the bill is about to isolation, depression, and perhaps even suicide?
Yeah, we just simply reject that argument altogether. And I do want to address some of the comments that Terry made as well. I want to be very clear about Senate Bill 150 is about protecting children. Protecting children. Most of the time, the most appropriate way to protect children is to empower their parents, because we fundamentally know that no one has the responsibility to direct the upbringing of their child. No one will do it better than their parents. But there are some instances, and I think if we were to talk about some of those instances, we would all agree, where we would say, even if a parent decides they want to do something that would harm their child, government has a right and responsibility, as was discussed earlier, about promoting justice and the goodwill of our folks, whether we're talking about giving young children alcohol, whether we're talking about giving them drugs, whether we're talking about giving them our car keys. Certainly we would all agree that that would be something that we wouldn't appreciate and shouldn't be a proper role. What are we talking about here? We're talking about mutilating young children. We're talking about promoting an ideology that would teach our young people that their biological sex, and I'm just going to read one of the most popular curriculums that comes from Planned Parenthood. Their curriculum says biological sex is assigned to a child after they are born by their doctor. That's just not a scientifically accurate statement, and it is tremendously harmful to teach our young children that they can identify and be pushed towards living a life that is not in reality with the biological truth of who they are and what we believe is what God created them to be. So I believe it's of fundamental importance that the legislature took action this session to protect children. And what the data shows, I want to be very clear about this as it relates to suicide, because some of the arguments that have been made, some of the things that the media has said on this issue, putting disclaimers on news pieces, really promoting the idea that children should be thinking about suicide in the context of some of these conversations has just been flat out disgraceful. The reality is, when children start walking down the path of not identifying with who they are and are pushed towards going on puberty blockers to mess around with their puberty, cross-sex hormones, and heaven forbid even some of these surgeries, what the data shows is when kids walk down that path, they become 19 to 20 times more likely of committing suicide. So the reality, the truth is, SB 150 will help save the lives of children. It will do that by stopping these harmful surgeries. And in the education context, as I said, it will stop our schools from promoting these harmful ideologies that are teaching our children a lie that says that they can be something opposite of their biological sex. And so I think it's fundamentally important to address that, to point out the data, what the data actually shows, and to really reject the premise of a lot of the questions that have come and say this is about protecting our children.
You have local control, local autonomy, as Dr. Brooks phrased it for schools. Does this not rid school districts of some of that autonomy by directing them on school policy when it comes to student preferred pronoun use and other items?
Yeah. When it comes to the portions of the bill that deal with parental rights and education, I don't think there's anything more local in terms of empowering parents to have a greater say of what's being taught to their children. I think local control is a great principle, but it cannot undercut the parental rights that parents have as it relates to their education. And like I said, I believe empowering parents to have a say is going to be a win for their children in schools. And long term, I continue to believe that incentivizing and empowering parents to play a larger role in their child's education in the public school system is going to be a win for the public school system. It comes back to putting children first. When we're talking about educational freedom, and that's really what we're talking about. We need to move towards a system where we empower children and we empower parents to give their children more choice. I think we can all agree that, or most of us can agree that, there are portions of the public education system that is failing our students in a lot of areas. And so the natural response to that is, let's open up the opportunity for children to have other options, for parents to have other options, to move away from this one-size-fits-all educational model that we've been operating under and that other states have moved to and have continued to flourish. And I believe, ultimately what we will see here in Kentucky, if the constitutional amendment, we were supportive of the measure this year and are hopeful and encouraged by the House and Senate leadership talking about it being a big priority next legislative session. If that was to pass, again, it would just open the door to have a robust conversation about what educational freedom would look like in our Commonwealth. And I think, again, it would be a long-term, it would be a win for kids, and it would also be a win for the public school system, because anytime you add a little bit of accountability and competition, that encourages the entire system to do better.
Mr.